"Can I sit here?" asked the single mom. "Only if you stay with me," said the Mafia boss. The fluorescent lights of the Aurora Heights train station cafeteria hummed a sick, yellow-green song. Outside, the night was a smear of sleet and exhaust, but here, it was a different kind of cold. It was the cold of disinfectant, stale coffee, and the quiet desperation of 3 in the morning. Lena Hartley felt that cold in her bones, a deep, invasive chill that her threadbare coat could not stop. She pushed the stroller, its left wheel squeaking a pathetic rhythm against the linoleum. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Each sound was a bullet, a betrayal of her location, and she winced, trying to shift the weight to silence it. Her shoulders ached from a day of carrying, walking, and running. Her eyes burned, raw from lack of sleep and the tears she refused to shed. In the stroller, her 2-year-old daughter, Evie, was a miracle of silence. Bundled in every layer Lena owned, her small face peaceful in the exhaustion-fueled sleep of the innocent, Lena had given her the last of the apple juice hours ago and had whispered 1,000 "I love yous" in the rattling bus station bathroom where they'd hidden for 2 hours. Now, there were no more corners to hide in. Her train, the 8:05 to a sister she had not spoken to in 3 years, was still hours away. She had exactly $37 and a maxed-out credit card that Tom had probably already flagged. She just needed a place to sit. A place that was not the hard, freezing plastic of the main waiting area, where a man with hollow eyes had been watching her for 20 minutes. The cafeteria was almost empty. A couple of rail workers covered in grime hunched over coffee at the counter, and a woman with a mountain of luggage was asleep on her arms at a table near the back. And then there was him. He sat alone in a booth by the fogged-over window, a pocket of absolute stillness in the buzzing room. He wore a suit. It was not just a suit. It was armor, black and impeccably tailored, a stark contrast to the grime. He was not drinking the sludge the cafeteria called coffee. A tiny, pristine white cup of espresso sat before him, untouched. He was looking out the window, but he was not seeing the sleet. He was waiting. He was the kind of man Lena had been trained to avoid her entire life. He radiated a quiet, coiled power that was 1,000 times more intimidating than Tom's loud, bullish rage, but the booth was isolated, and more importantly, he was not looking at her. Lena took a shaky breath. Her knees were weak. She could not stand any longer. She pushed the squeaking stroller toward him, her heart a cold, hard knot in her chest. She stopped a few feet away. He did not turn. He did not acknowledge her. He simply existed, a shadow cut from more expensive cloth. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was a dry rasp. He turned his head. It was a slow, deliberate movement. The world narrowed. He was not handsome in the way of movie stars. His features were too harsh. His nose aquiline. His jaw a sharp line that looked like it had been carved from granite. But his eyes, they were dark, devoid of light, and they held her, pinned her, dissected her in a single silent second. He saw the cheap coat, the chapped lips, the terror, and the fight that was barely keeping her upright. Lena's throat closed. This was a mistake. "I'm sorry to bother you," she stammered, gripping the stroller handle until her knuckles turned white. "All the other tables. Could I just sit here? Just for a little while? My daughter." He studied her. The silence stretched, filled only by the hum of the lights and the distant, mournful cry of a train. He was not looking at her with pity. It was not kind. It was an appraisal, and he was weighing her. Finally, his gaze dropped to the sleeping child in the stroller, then returned to her face. He gave a single, curt nod. The relief that washed over Lena was so profound her legs almost buckled. "Thank you." She slid into the cracked vinyl booth, her movements clumsy with fatigue. She carefully maneuvered the stroller into the space beside her, tucking it in, creating a small, fragile fortress. She kept her coat on. She kept her hands in her lap, clenched together. The man returned his attention to the window. The silence, now that she was in it, was heavier. It was his. She was just a guest. She should say nothing. That was the rule. Be small, be quiet, be invisible. It was the only way she had survived Tom, But the silence was also an accusation. He had given her a seat. She owed him something. "It's a cold night," she whispered. Staring at her own hands, he turned from the window again. This time, his gaze was less intense, shaded with something. Curiosity. "It is," he replied. His voice was a low, smooth baritone, like gravel wrapped in velvet. It held a faint trace of an accent she could not place. Something old world and dangerous. "Are you waiting for a train?" she asked, immediately regretting the question. It was too personal. Tom hated personal questions. He did not seem to know the C word. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched one corner of his mouth, a gesture that held no humor. "You could say that. And you?" "Yes, the 8:05. That is 5 hours from now." It was not a question. It was a statement of fact. "I know. I just needed to get out of the cold." He watched her, and Lena had the unnerving feeling that he could see the $37 in her pocket, see the lie she had told the bus driver, see the panic that was her only fuel. She shivered, a full-body tremor she could not control. She reached into her pocket for a tissue, and her coat sleeve, thin and worn, rode up her arm. She saw his eyes drop, narrow, instinctively. She yanked the sleeve down, but it was too late. He had seen it, the dark, thumb-shaped bruise on her inner wrist, a blooming, ugly flower of purple and yellow. Lena's face burned with a hot, terrible shame. The man said nothing. His face remained a mask of polite indifference, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. A single, flickering sign of what? Annoyance? Disgust? Lena felt the need to explain, to apologize for her own damaged state. "I fell," she lied, the word tasting like ash. "I'm just clumsy." He held her gaze. He did not blink. He did not nod. He simply let her lie hanging in the air, a dead, limp thing. He knew. "I'm leaving," she said, the truth suddenly bubbling, desperate for air. "I'm leaving someone who hurt me. It's fine. I'm fine. I just had to go." The man looked away, returning his gaze to the window. Lena thought he was dismissing her, that the conversation was over. But under the table, he slipped his phone from his pocket. His thumb moved, unlocking the screen. He sent a text, a single, coded message to a man sitting in a dark sedan parked across the street. "Find out." A moment later, he looked back at her. "You are running." "I am relocating," she said, trying to reclaim a sliver of dignity. "And he is looking for you." Her breath hitched. "I don't know. Maybe. I don't think he knows where I am." The memory of Tom's voice, thick with a possessive, boozy promise, filled her head. "You think you can hide from me? Lena, you are my wife. You and Evie, you're mine. You forget that. I'll have to remind you, and you know you don't like the reminders." She'd not been his wife, not legally. She'd been his property. The flashback was so vivid, so sudden, that she flinched. She tasted the metallic tang of fear. It was the same fear she felt when she heard his keys in the lock, the same fear that came when he'd call her phone, demanding a minute-by-minute accounting of her day. He had taken her phone. To save her the bill, he had taken her bank card. To manage their finances, he had taken her friends, her family, her reflection in the mirror, until all that was left was this hollowed-out, trembling woman who could not even buy a cup of coffee. She was shaking again, and she could not stop. Hot tears welled, blurring the harsh lights of the cafeteria. She wiped them away. Angry and humiliated, a waitress, a tired woman with a pencil behind her ear, appeared. "Can I get you two something?" "An espresso." "Double," the man said. "And for you, hun?" "Oh, no, nothing for me. Thank you," Lena whispered, looking down. "Bring her a bowl of chicken soup," the man said, his voice quiet but absolute, "and a grilled cheese sandwich, and a coffee. Lots of milk and sugar." "Sir, Lena started, mortified. I don't have—" "I am not asking you to pay," he said, his dark eyes fixed on her. He was not offering. He was commanding. "You are shaking. Your daughter will need you to be strong. You will eat." Lena looked at him, at this impossible, dangerous stranger. She was too tired to fight, too tired to argue, and the mention of the soup, of warmth, undid her. She nodded, a small, jerky movement. When the food came, It was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. The soup was thick. The sandwich was buttery and hot. She ate. She did not taste it at first. Her body simply consumed it, a machine desperate for fuel. She ate with a primal, desperate hunger that made her want to weep with shame. He did not watch her eat. He gave her that small mercy, looking out the window, sipping his own bitter espresso. He let her have this. She ate the whole thing. Every last drop. Every last crumb. She drank the hot, sweet coffee, and for the first time in 48 hours, the shivering in her bones began to subside. A small, fragile warmth bloomed in her stomach. She felt human. She set the cup down. "Thank you," she said. And this time, her voice was clear. Thank you." He turned to her. His phone buzzed on the table, a brief, silent message. He glanced at it. Tom Calder, enforcer for the Ravik Syndicate. His eyes flickered. The Ravik Syndicate. His enemies. His expression did not change, but a new, colder calculation entered his gaze. This woman was not just running from a bully. She was running from them. "You are welcome, Lena," he said. She froze. Her blood ran colder than the sleet outside. "How did you know my name?" He tapped his phone. "You paid for your bus ticket with a card that was declined. Lena Hartley. Your ex is Tom Calder. He's not a good man." She scrambled to get out of the booth, her heart hammering against her ribs. He was one of them. He worked for Tom. He was a trap. "I have to go." She fumbled with the stroller, her hands shaking so badly she could not release the brake. "Let me go, please." "I'm not stopping you," he said, his voice calm. He had not moved. "But Calder is Ravik's man. Do you know what that means?" "I don't know who that is." "I don't care. I just want my daughter to be safe." She yanked on the stroller, panicked. The movement was too rough. Evie, startled from her deep sleep, let out a confused, sleepy whimper. "Shh, baby, shh. Mommy's here," Lena soothed, her voice frantic. Evie's eyes fluttered open. She was not crying, just disoriented. Her little hand, pink and impossibly small, emerged from the bundle of blankets. She batted at the air, and then her fingers found and clamped onto the first solid thing they could reach, the man's forefinger. He had been resting his hand on the table. He had not pulled it away. Lena went utterly still. Dante Moretti stared at the tiny hand wrapped around his finger. He stared at the perfect miniature fingernails, the trusting, absolute grip. He commanded 500 men. His hands signed orders that ended lives and built empires. No one had touched him without his permission in 20 years, and no one, ever, had touched him with such complete, unthinking innocence. He felt the touch like a brand, a small point of heat that shot straight up his arm and into his chest, where it landed, heavy and strange. Lena was breathless with terror. "Evie, no, let go. I'm so sorry, sir." Lena tried to gently pry her daughter's fingers open. Evie, in a sleepy, stubborn reflex, only tightened her grip. "It is all right," Dante said. His voice was rough. He looked up, not at Lena, but at the child. Evie's eyes, wide and brown and still clouded with sleep, looked back at him without fear. Then, slowly, Dante Moretti looked at Lena. He saw the terror in her eyes, the terror of him, the terror of Tom, the terror of the world. He had come to this station to oversee a quiet, necessary exchange, a piece of business that now seemed trivial. He had been interrupted by a stray, a broken bird. He should have sent her away. He should have had his men take her to a shelter, cut her loose. But she was not just a stray. She was a stray who had run from his enemy. And his enemy's enemy was his... No, that was not it. That was the old logic. This was something new. He looked back at the small hand on his. This was his, too. He made a decision. It was illogical. It was impulsive. It was dangerous. And he had not felt this alive in a decade. Lena finally pulled Evie's hand free. "I'm sorry, we'll go. We'll wait outside." She began to push the stroller back into the cold, into the danger. "You can stay if you want," Dante said, the words surprising himself. Lena paused. She looked at him, her eyes wide, searching his face for the trick, the angle, the price. "I don't understand," she said. "The 8:05, he said, "is a long time from now." The cafeteria is warm. The coffee is passable. You can stay. But why? Dante Moretti leaned back in the booth, the picture of casual control. He gave her the first real, albeit small, smile of the night. It was devastating. Because, he said, his voice a quiet promise that was also a command. I am not Tom Calder. Lena looked at the door, at the sleet and the dark, hollow-eyed men of the world. Then she looked at this man, a shark in a tailored suit, who had fed her, who had not flinched from her bruises, and who had let her daughter hold his hand. She took a long, shuddering breath. She pushed the stroller back into the alcove, its wheel squeaking, and, very slowly, Lena Hartley sat back down. For 2 hours, Lena sat in the booth, a silent hostage to a stranger's kindness. She and the man, whose name she still did not know, barely spoke. He worked on his phone, his focus absolute. Evie slept, woke up, and ate the other half of the grilled cheese sandwich, which Lena had saved. When Evie looked at the man, she did not cry. She just watched him with wide, curious eyes. The man watched her back. It was an unsettling, silent communion, a predator observing a fawn, and the fawn having no concept of danger. At 5 a.m, 2 hours before her train, the man's phone buzzed. He read the message, his face impassive, and stood up. It is time to go, he said. Lena's heart seized. Go? Where? My train. You are not taking that train. He slid his phone into his jacket pocket. Your ex is Tom Calder. He works for the Ravik Syndicate. They are my competition. Lena's blood turned to ice water. I don't know who that is. He knows you are missing, the man continued, his voice a low, factual monotone, as if discussing the weather. A train station is the first place a man like that looks. This station is already being watched, not by my men. Lena's breath hitched. How do you... That phone, he said, nodding at her coat pocket. He put tracking software on it, did he not? He knows you are in this city. He might even know you are in this building. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Of course. How stupid she was. All those times he found her when she was just out for a walk, just checking in. He had been tracking her. She was a fool. She fumbled for the phone, her hands shaking. I have to get rid of it. It is too late for that, he said. Come. Now. Who are you? She whispered, terrified. He paused, looking down at her, his dark eyes unreadable. I am the man who is getting you out of here. That is all you need to know. A second man appeared, materializing at the end of the booth as if from the shadows. He was huge, built like a refrigerator, and wore a similar dark suit. He looked at Lena, then at the man, then nodded once. Marco, take her bag, the man commanded. I can take it, Lena protested. Clutching her thin diaper bag, Marco simply took it from her, his movements gentle but absolute. We will use the service exit, the man said. Lena grabbed Evie, pulling her from the stroller and clutching her tight to her chest. Evie, sensing the sudden panic, buried her face in Lena's neck. Please, Lena said, her voice trembling. I have a sister, and I just need to get on the train. We'll be fine. The man looked at her, his patience clearly wearing thin. You will be dead before you reach the platform. Or worse, you will be back with him. He will not be gentle this time. Now, walk. He put a hand on her back. It was not a comfort. It was a steering mechanism. It was heavy, warm, and left no room for argument. She was being herded. They moved through a set of swinging doors marked Employees Only into a concrete hallway that smelled of bleach and old grease. Marco led, the man walked beside her, and 2 other men, who had appeared just as silently, followed behind. She was surrounded. This was not a rescue. This was an abduction. They exited into a dark, covered loading dock. A black SUV, longer than a hearse, and just as quiet, idled at the curb. Marco opened the back door. Get in, Lena, the man said. She looked at the dark interior. It was a cage. She looked back at the station, the sickly yellow lights. That was another cage. She had run from one monster only to be caught by another. Where are you taking me? To the only safe place in this city for you tonight, he said. My home. She had no choice. She had $37, a child in her arms, and a man who wanted to hurt her somewhere in the city. She climbed into the SUV. The man slid in beside her. The door closed with a heavy, final, vacuum-sealed thud, the sound of a vault closing. The ride was utterly silent. The windows were so dark she could not see out. She could only see her own reflection. A pale, terrified ghost clutching a child. The man, her captor, her savior, sat beside her, perfectly still. He smelled faintly of expensive soap and something cold, like metal. He was on his phone again, his thumbs moving in a silent, rapid-fire ballet of commands. Lena finally found her voice. "My phone. It's still on." He looked up. "Yes. He's tracking it. He'll follow us. I know." He tapped on the glass partition. "Marco, take the phone." Lena passed the device, her lifeline, her chain, to the man in the front seat. "Where to, boss?" Marco asked. "Give it to Arturo. Tell him to take a scenic drive. Make sure he is followed. Then lose them. And us. Home. The back way." The SUV took a sharp, sudden turn that pressed Lena against the leather seat. She realized then that they had not been driving. They had been waiting. A second, identical SUV peeled away from the curb, and hers plunged into the dark labyrinth of the city's downtown. They did not drive to a house. They drove into the earth, into a sterile, white-tiled private parking garage beneath a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The elevator opened directly into his apartment. The doors opened and Lena forgot to breathe. Her apartment with Tom could fit into this living room 10 times. It was a space, not a room. 2 entire walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, and the city of Aurora Heights was spilled out below them. A carpet of diamonds and light. The furniture was minimal, dark and severe. Black leather, dark wood, gleaming chrome, and cold marble. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly sterile. It was a fortress in the sky. Evie, in her arms, just said, "Wow." "Welcome to my home," the man said, shrugging off his coat and handing it to Marco. It's a," Lena stammered. "A palace." "It is a box," he said, walking to the window. "But it is a secure one." Lena clutched Evie, who was now squirming, overwhelmed by the new space. "I can't stay here." He turned. "I've already told you. You have nowhere else to go." "I can't pay you, she said, the words tasting like shame. "I have no money." He controlled everything. "I am not asking for payment." "I have to leave," she insisted, her pride warring with her terror. "I'll take my chances. I have a sister. I can—" "Tom Calder is searching for you. He now knows you were with someone. He is an animal, and you are his favorite possession. If you leave this building, his men will find you within an hour." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "And what they will do to you, I will not permit. Do you understand?" The finality of it, the cold, possessive certainty in his voice, broke her. She was a prisoner, a protected, gilded prisoner. She nodded, tears of humiliation burning her eyes. Evie, sensing her mother's distress, finally squirmed free. She dropped to the marble floor and, in the terrifying, fearless way of toddlers, toddled straight toward the man who owned the sky. Lena was mortified. "Evie, no, come back to Mommy." Dante froze. He looked down at the small child approaching him as if she were a bomb. He was a man who dealt in threats, in violence, in quiet commands that moved millions of dollars and ended lives. He did not do children. Evie stopped at his expensive, hand-stitched leather shoes. She looked up at his face, a towering, shadowed mountain. She reached out one small, starfish hand and patted his knee, then she lifted her arms. "Up!" Lena rushed forward. "Oh, God, no, I'm so sorry. She's just tired. Evie, come here." "It is fine," Dante said, his voice strained. He looked at Lena, his expression completely lost. "What does she want?" "She wants you to pick her up," Lena whispered, horrified. Dante stared at the child. He looked as if she had asked him to defuse a tactical weapon. He hesitated, then bent in a stiff, awkward crouch, a king lowering himself from a throne. Evie did not wait. She lunged forward, wrapping her arms around his neck and patting his cheek with a sticky hand. Dante Moretti went rigid, a sharp, unfamiliar intake of breath. He had been shot twice, stabbed once. Nothing had ever felt like this. This small, warm, trusting weight. It was terrifying. It was a vulnerability he could not control. He hated it, and he did not. He stood up abruptly, holding Evie stiffly away from his body. Evie just giggled and snuggled into his expensive suit jacket. "Marco," Dante said, his voice rough, "show them to the guest suite. See that she has everything she needs." He thrust the child back at Lena, his movements jerky and panicked. He turned and walked away, down a long marble hall, needing to put distance between himself and that feeling. The guest suite was larger than any apartment Lena had ever lived in. The bed was a cloud of white linens. The bathroom was a cave of white marble and glass. A travel crib, new and pristine, was already set up in the corner. Mrs. Rossi, the housekeeper, has stocked the closet, Marco said, his voice surprisingly gentle. "If you need anything else, just use the intercom." He left, and Lena was alone with the silence, the luxury, and her sleeping child. She put Evie in the crib, and the little girl was asleep before her head hit the mattress. Lena looked at herself in the massive, gold-leafed mirror. She saw the grime from the station, the dark circles under her eyes, the blooming purple bruise on her wrist. She saw Tom's property. She turned on the water for the bath. It was a tub so deep she could float in it. Steam filled the room. She stripped off her worn, cheap clothes, the uniform of her captivity, and let them fall to the floor. She sank into the scalding water, and the dam that had held for 2 days finally broke. She did not sob loudly. She did not wail. She wept, her shoulders shaking, silent, racking, agonizing tears. She cried for her lost art, for the sister she had been forced to abandon, for the fear that was now her constant companion. She cried because she was safe, and she cried because she was a captive. The door to the suite was open just a crack, left ajar by Marco. Dante walked past, on his way to his office. He heard the splash of water. He glanced in. He saw her. Her back was to him, her head bowed, her shoulders shaking in that silent, terrible rhythm of grief. He saw the sharp, pale line of her spine, the vulnerability of her neck. His first instinct was to close the door, to give her privacy. His second was to go in. To what? Comfort her? He did not know how. He did neither. He just stood in the hallway, a silent sentinel, and watched her break. He watched her wash away the grime and the fear, and he respected the strength it took to fall apart so completely. He said nothing, and after a long moment, he walked away. Hours later, the city was dark again. Evie was asleep. Lena was clean, wrapped in a silk robe she had found in the closet, a garment that probably cost more than her last month's rent. She felt alien in it, an imposter. A soft, polite knock echoed on the suite door. She opened it. It was him, Dante. He held a bottle of dark red wine in 2 crystal glasses. "I thought you might need this," he said. She let him in. He was no longer her captor. He was her host. They sat in the suite's small living area, the city lights a silent audience. He poured the wine. It was rich and smooth. "I never asked your name," Lena said, her voice quiet. Dante Moretti." The name meant nothing to her, and yet it felt heavy. "Thank you, Dante, for this, for tonight." He nodded, swirling the wine in his glass. "He should not have hurt you." They sat in silence, but it was a different silence than the one in the car. This one was charged, fragile. "What did you do?" he asked, his eyes on the city before him. "I painted," she said, the memory a dull ache. "I taught art classes to children at the community center." "You liked it?" "I loved it." "And him?" he asked. "Why did you stay?" Lena looked down into her glass. "At first, he was charming. He was excited. And then I got pregnant, and the charm became controlled. I stayed because I was afraid. I thought I was protecting Evie, but I was just teaching her how to be afraid." He respected her honesty. "My father taught me that feelings were a liability," he said, his voice a low rumble, "a weakness to be exploited. It is a lesson I learned well." "Is it true?" she asked. "Feelings," he said, "are for people who can afford the consequences. I cannot." The air between them grew thick, charged with the wine and the lateness of the hour. He was standing now, and he was too close. She could feel the heat radiating from his body. She looked up at him, and he was looking at her mouth. "You are not like the women I know, Lena," he whispered. "Is that a good thing?" Her voice was breathless. "It is a dangerous thing." He leaned in. It was a slow, deliberate movement. She did not pull back. She did not breathe. She wanted this. She wanted to feel something, anything other than fear. He was an inch away. She could smell the wine on his breath, see the flecks of gold in his dark, dark eyes. And then he stopped. He saw it. The shadow in her eyes. The shadow of Tom. The reflex of a flinch. He closed his eyes for a short second, his jaw clenching. He would not be another man who takes something from her. Instead, with a control that was almost violent in its restraint, he lifted one hand. He did not touch her face. He did not touch her lips. He gently, slowly, brushed a stray strand of damp hair from her temple. His knuckles grazed her skin, a feather-light touch that was more intimate than any kiss. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through her. "Get some sleep," he said, his voice suddenly rough. He turned and left the room. Lena stood there for a long time, her hand pressed to her temple, trembling. In his office, Dante poured himself a whiskey. Marco entered. "It is confirmed. Capo," Marco said, his voice low. "Tom Calder. He's a high-level enforcer for Ravik. Word on the street is he is obsessed with the girl. He's calling in every favor. He's convinced you stole her." Dante stared at the city lights, the whiskey untouched. He thought of the small, trusting hand on his knee. He thought of the silent, shaking shoulders in the bath. He thought of the shadow of fear in her eyes when he leaned in. He had taken her in as a strategic asset, a pawn in his war against the Ravik syndicate. He knew, as he stared into the night, that she was no longer a pawn. "He will not have her back, Marco," Dante said, his voice flat and cold as the marble floor. "She's in Moretti territory now. Tell our men. She's to be protected, at all costs." Dante made a silent vow. He would not return her to that life. He would burn the Ravik syndicate to the ground first, miles away. In a grimy apartment that smelled of stale beer and desperation, Tom Calder smashed his fist into a wall. "What do you mean? She was with a man," he roared. A bruised, terrified lackey flinched. "A waitress at the station. Boss, saw her. She left with a man, an Italian, in a suit, in a black SUV. Tom's blood ran cold. There was only one Italian in Aurora Heights who commanded that kind of hardware. "Moretti," Tom whispered, the name tasting like acid and bile. His rage was instant, cold and pure. He did not care who Dante Moretti was. He had stolen his property. He had stolen his Lena. "Get the crew," Tom snarled, grabbing his jacket. "Call Ravik. Tell him Moretti just declared war." Lena woke to an unfamiliar quiet. It was not the oppressive, fearful silence of Tom's apartment, where a creaking floorboard was a sin. It was a deep, insulated, wealthy silence, the sound of a world operating far above the noise of the street. Sunlight, clean and sharp, sliced across the plush carpet of the guest suite. She had slept for 10 hours, a deep, restorative, dreamless sleep that felt like a resurrection. Evie's crib was empty, a white-hot spike of panic, a muscle memory of pure terror, shot through Lena. She was out of the bed in a second, her heart a trip hammer against her ribs. "Evie?" She heard it then. Not a cry, but a giggle. A small, bubbling sound that was so alien in this sterile, marble and glass fortress that it sounded like a bird in a tomb. She followed the sound, her bare feet padding silently on the cold marble floor of the main hall. It led her toward the vast sun-drenched kitchen, a cavern of stainless steel and black granite. She stopped in the doorway, her hand over her mouth. Dante Moretti was sitting at a glass breakfast table, the city's morning skyline blazing behind him. He was in a simple black t-shirt and dark pants, a concession to the morning, but he still looked as formal as a judge, and on his lap, perched as if she owned him, sat Evie. Evie was holding a single O-shaped, honey-sweetened oat cereal piece. She was holding it between her thumb and forefinger with the intense concentration of a surgeon. "Open," Evie commanded. Dante, the man who had herded her from the station like a dangerous animal, who commanded an army of silent men, looked trapped. He looked profoundly uncomfortable and vaguely terrified. "I do not think," he said, his voice a low rumble, "that this is part of my nutritional plan." "Open," Evie said again, a note of toddler-sized steel in her voice. Dante sighed, a sound of complete, bewildered defeat. He opened his mouth. Evie carefully, meticulously, placed the single Cheerio on his tongue. He closed his mouth, his jaw working once. He swallowed. Evie clapped her hands, delighted. "Good," she pronounced. She immediately reached into the small plastic bowl on the table for another. Dante caught Lena's eye from across the room. She had made a small sound, a half-gasp, half-laugh. His face did not flush, but his eyes narrowed, a silent plea for extraction. "Good morning," Lena said, her voice unsteady. "Mommy!" Evie shrieked, pointing at Dante. "He ate it." "I see that. Baby," Lena said, walking forward. Her heart was doing something strange, a painful, aching squeeze. This gentleness, this domesticity, was a kind of violence to her system. Tom had never held Evie without a reason, never without it being a performance or a prelude to a demand. To see her daughter so fearless, so trusting, with a man who was, in his own way, 1,000 times more dangerous than Tom, was a paradox that made her head spin. "It seems you have a fan," Lena said, stopping at the table. "It seems I have been claimed," Dante corrected, his voice dry. He looked at Evie, who was now patting his t-shirt. "She is persistent." "She is that," Lena said, smiling. She reached for her daughter. "Come on, baby. Let's let Mr. Moretti have his breakfast." "I am finished," Dante said, a little too quickly. He carefully, awkwardly, handed Evie over. Lena settled her daughter on her hip, and the small, warm weight was a familiar, grounding comfort. "There is breakfast for you," Dante said, nodding to the counter. A silver dome covered a plate, fresh fruit, scrambled eggs, toast, a glass of orange juice. It was more than she had eaten in a week. "Mrs. Rossi, your housekeeper." "She's very thorough," Lena said. "Mrs. Rossi has the day off," Dante said, standing. He was watching her, his gaze intense. "I made breakfast." Lena froze, her hand halfway to the plate. "Did you cook?" "I'm told eggs are difficult to ruin." He walked to the espresso machine, which hissed to life. "She ate my first attempt." He nodded at Evie. "This is the second—" Lena stared at him. He had made her breakfast. He had fed her child. He was letting her daughter climb on him. She was starting to trust him. And that was the most terrifying thing that had happened yet. It was too fast. It was a lie. Men like this, men with this much power, did not make eggs, not without a price. "I can't just sit here," Lena said, the words tumbling out. "I can't just be a guest. I have no money. I have no way to pay you. And this—" She gestured to the food, the view, the luxury. "This is not my life. I need to do something. I can cook. Let me cook for you. Dinner, please." She was babbling, desperate to reclaim a single piece of herself, to contribute, to not be the broken bird he had taken in. Dante turned, the tiny espresso cup in his hand. He studied her, the fierce, desperate pride in her eyes. He saw her need to be a partner, not a charity case. "I am a guest in my own kitchen," he said. "The stove is a mystery, but if you insist—" "I do," she said, her chin lifting. A slow, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. "Very well. Tonight, but I will be forced to supervise, to ensure," he said, taking a sip of his espresso, "that you do not ruin my pans." The day was a strange, suspended dream. Lena played with Evie on the plush carpets, the city a silent, distant movie screen outside the glass. Marco and the other men were invisible, but Lena knew they were there. The penthouse was a silent, humming fortress. At 7 o'clock, she put a sleepy, clean Evie to bed in the crib. Then she washed her hands, tied back her hair, and walked into the kitchen. Dande was there, waiting for her. He had changed into a dark, button-down shirt, The sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing a dusting of dark hair and the intricate, menacing edge of a tattoo. He had set out ingredients: fresh pasta, tomatoes, basil, garlic, a block of Parmesan. "You are a mind reader," Lena said, touching the fresh basil, inhaling the scent. "I asked Marco what you used to cook." Of course, the man had a file on her. But tonight she did not care. She was a painter, and this was a blank canvas. She began to move. She minced garlic, chopped tomatoes. Dante did not help. He did not move. He leaned against the far counter, a glass of the same red wine from the night before in his hand, and he watched. It was not a judging gaze. It was not a leering one. It was watchful. He watched her hands, the quick, efficient way she moved. He watched her face as she concentrated, the small frown of focus. He watched her body as she moved between the counter and the stove. Her borrowed clothes, a simple silk blouse and pants from Mrs. Rossi's guest collection, moving with her. "You are efficient," he said, his voice a low rumble in the quiet. "My mother taught me," Lena said, not looking up. She was sautéing the garlic, the smell rich and warm. She said a good meal was the only thing you could trust to comfort you. A comforting meal, he mused. That is a new concept. "What did you eat growing up?" she asked, glancing at him. "Whatever was put in front of me. Food was fuel. It was not comfort." "That's sad," she said, without thinking. He pushed off the counter and walked closer. He was at her shoulder now, watching the sauce bubble. It was practical. "Life doesn't have to be just practical," she said, adding the basil. "It can be beautiful, too." She turned to reach for a wooden spoon, and she was suddenly, completely trapped. He was closer than she thought. Her body brushed against his. The contact was electric. It was a spark in the air, a sudden, breathless pause in the rhythm of the kitchen. She was surrounded by his scent, soap and wine and that cold, metallic something. She was pinned between the stove and his body, a wall of heat and muscle. She looked up. His dark eyes were on her, not with hunger, but with that intense, unnerving curiosity, as if she were a puzzle he was on the verge of solving. He was not looking at her. He was studying her. "You are not afraid of me," he whispered, and it was not a question. "Yes, I am," she whispered back, her voice shaking. "I'm terrified. Not of this." He was close, his breath warm on her temple. "You are afraid of what I am, but you are not afraid of me." He was right. She was not flinching. She was not recoiling. She was leaning in. He lifted his hand, the one that had touched her hair the night before. He traced the line of her jaw, his thumb brushing her lower lip. His touch was rough and gentle all at once. "Lena," he breathed. The oven timer buzzed, a shrill, shocking, electronic scream. They both jumped. Lena pulled back, her face burning, her heart a frantic bird in her chest. "The pasta," she stammered, turning back to the stove. The tension was broken, or perhaps it was only stretched tighter. They ate dinner at the massive glass table. The city lights a $1 million backdrop. The food was simple, but it tasted like a feast. They talked. He asked her about her art. She asked him about nothing. She could not. The wall of his privacy was absolute, but he laughed. Once, she told a story about Evie and a disastrous encounter with a bucket of blue paint, and a sound came from him, a short, rough bark of genuine amusement. It was the most beautiful sound she had ever heard. After dinner, he was restless. The silence of the penthouse seemed to be closing in on him. "Come," he said, standing abruptly. "There is something I want to show you." He led her to a small, unassuming door near his office. It opened onto a narrow, concrete stairwell. "Where are we going?" "Up." The door at the top opened into the night, and Lena gasped. They were on the roof. It was not a roof. It was a garden, a secret, impossible oasis of green in the sky, trees and huge stone planters, beds of white flowers that glowed in the moonlight, and a single elegant glass pavilion. The wind was high and clean, and the city was a distant, silent hum. "It's magical," she said, walking to the edge. A low glass wall was the only thing between her and a 50-story drop. "It is my mother's," Dante said, coming to stand beside her. She liked flowers. It is the only place in the city where I cannot hear the traffic." They stood in silence, the wind whipping her hair. "Why did you bring me here, Dante?" He turned to her. The moon was a sliver of white, but it was enough. It lit the planes of his face, cast shadows in the hollows of his cheeks. "Because," he said, his voice soft, "you are the first person who has been in my kitchen, and you are the first person I have wanted to bring up here." The air was thin, cold, and charged. He was closer now. "You have brought chaos into my house. Lena Hartley is quiet. It smells like basil. I do not know what to do with it. I'm sorry," she started. "Do not be," he whispered. He reached out and cupped her face, his hands warm against her cold skin. "Do not be." He leaned in. This time, he did not hesitate. This time, it was not a question. He kissed her. It was not a gentle kiss. It was not brutal. It was a kiss of discovery, a drowning man tasting air. It was a kiss of deep, pent-up, and long-denied everything. His mouth was firm, warm, and it tasted of wine and loneliness. He held her head as if she were a priceless, fragile thing, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Lena's world, which had been tilting for 3 days, spun off its axis, a jolt, hot and sharp, shot from her lips to her toes. She did not kiss him back, not at first. She just held on. Her hands came up to grip his shirt, his forearms, anything solid in this free fall. He deepened the kiss, a low sound in his throat, and she opened for him. It was a connection so profound, so sudden. It was terrifying. It was everything she had ever wanted, and that was why she had to stop. She pulled back, a ragged, tearing gasp, her breath plumed in the cold air. She was shaking, her whole body, from a force stronger than the wind. "I can't," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his chest. "I can't." He did not let her go. His arms came around her, holding her steady. "You are safe. I will not hurt you." "That's just it," she said, looking up at him, her eyes wild. "You won't, but I will. I don't know who I am when I am not afraid. I don't know how to do this. I'm so vulnerable, and you are so you. You are so powerful. I will just disappear. I will become whatever you want me to be. I did it before." He looked at her, his expression a mask of pain she did not understand. "I am not Tom Calder," he said, his voice a blade. "I know," she wept, her voice breaking. "You are not, and that's what scares me." He held her, his jaw set, his body a wall of iron. He understood. She was not rejecting him. She was terrified of her own broken instincts. "I will not force you. Lena," he said, his voice a low, rough vow. "I will not take anything from you, but you must know this." He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes were black, bottomless, and held a possessive fire that was both terrifying and comforting. "I do not let go," he said. "Once I decide that someone is mine, the promise, the threat, the vow, hung in the cold night air." Later, in her suite, she could not sleep. She was too alive. Her lips still burned. She was lying in the dark. Evie's soft breathing, the only sound. When it happened, it was not a loud noise. It was a dull, heavy thud from the hallway, then a muffled pop. Lena was on her feet before she was awake, her blood turned to ice. She knew that sound. Tom's friends were sportsmen. She knew the sound of suppressed gunfire. She grabbed Evie from the crib. Evie let out a sleepy, confused cry. "Shh, baby, shh," Lena whispered, her heart exploding in her chest. She backed into the marble bathroom, the only room with no windows, and fumbled for the light switch, then thought better of it. She sank to the cold floor, behind the door, shielding Evie with her body. The door to her suite burst open, slamming against the wall. Lena stifled a scream. "Lena!" His voice was not a whisper. It was a roar. Dante. He was in the doorway, a shadow against the hall light. He was not in his shirt. He was bare-chested, and in his hand he held a sleek, black, and very real gun. He was not a businessman. He was a warrior. He scanned the room, his eyes finding the empty bed, the empty crib. "In here!" Lena cried, her voice a strangled squeak. He was in the bathroom in 2 strides. He saw her, huddled on the floor, a terrified mother animal, shielding her young. His face, which had been a mask of cold, controlled fury, softened just for a second. "It is over," he said, his voice low, calming. He clicked the safety on the gun and set it on the marble counter. They did not get in. What was that?" Lena was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "A problem," he said. He crouched in front of her. "Are you all right? Is she?" Lena just nodded, unable to speak. He held out his hands. "Come." He pulled her to her feet, and then he did something she never would have expected. He wrapped his arms around both of them, pulling Lena and Evie against his bare, warm chest. He held them, his hand stroking Lena's hair, his body a solid, immovable wall. "You are safe," he murmured, his voice rumbling in her ear. "They will not touch you. I will not let them." She clung to him, inhaling his scent, her fear slowly ebbing, replaced by a terrible, cold dread. She pulled back, just enough to look at his face. The man in the kitchen who was afraid of a Cheerio was gone. The man on the rooftop who kissed her was gone. This was someone else. This was his truth. "What are you?" she asked, her voice raw, her eyes searching for him. She was not asking his name. She was asking for the truth that had just tried to break down her door. Dante Moretti looked at the woman he had just kissed, the woman he had just vowed to protect. He looked at her, and he gave her the only truth that mattered. "The only man," he said, his voice flat and cold as the grave, "who can keep you alive." The gunshot echo from the night before had not faded. It lived in the silence of the penthouse, a ghost in the marble hallways. Lena felt it when she woke, a renewed, cold dread that sat in her stomach. Dante had disappeared before dawn, a silent, lethal shadow, leaving her alone in the massive guest bed where he had deposited her after she had calmed down. She was a prisoner, a very polite, well-guarded, well-fed prisoner, but the illusion of choice was gone. The men who had tried to breach the hall had not been Tom's usual bar-brawling thugs. They were professionals, and Dante was the man who stopped them. She spent the morning watching Evie play, the toddler blissfully unaware, building towers with sugar packets she had swiped from the kitchen, with every giggle. Lena's resolve hardened. She could not just sit here, a doll in a glass box, waiting for the next attack. She had to reclaim something, even if it was just paper. When Dante returned in the afternoon, his face was a mask of cold control. He had not slept. She could see it in the tight line of his jaw. "I need to leave," she said before he could speak. His eyes, black and unreadable, snapped to her. "You are not leaving. Not for good. I have things. At a lawyer's office. Documents." Her voice was shaking, but she held his gaze. "My mother's will. Custody papers for Evie that I tried to file. My old passport. Things that prove I am me. That proves she is mine. I can have those retrieved," he said, turning away, dismissing her. "No." The word was sharper than she intended. He turned back, surprised. "You don't understand. Tom. He'll say I'm an unfit mother. He'll say I ran off. I need my life. The pieces of it. They're in a safe deposit box at my lawyer's office. I have to sign for them. Please." He was silent for a long, agonizing minute. He was warring with himself. The protector, who wanted her locked in this tower, and whatever he was, who had kissed her on the roof. "It is too dangerous," he said, his voice flat. "What you did last night," she said, her voice dropping, "was dangerous. This is just an errand. I will not live in fear. Dante, I will not let you or him turn me into a ghost." He saw it, the steel, the woman who had found the courage to run for the first time. He gave a single, curt nod. "Fine." The relief was so profound, she almost buckled. "But," he said, his voice ablade, "you do not go alone. Marco will drive you. Angelo and Nico will follow. You will not step out of the car. You will not breathe without my men's permission. Do you understand?" "Yes," she whispered. An hour later, Lena was in the back of the same black SUV, a fortress on wheels. Marco drove, his eyes constantly moving, checking every mirror, every alley. Angelo, a man built like a bull, sat in the passenger seat. Behind them, a second, identical SUV shadowed their every move. The contrast was sickening. She was wearing a borrowed cashmere coat that felt like a cloud, surrounded by men armed with guns, to go to an office in a run-down building that smelled of old carpet and desperation. This was her old life, colliding with her new, terrifying reality. "We are here," Marco said, pulling up to the curb. The office of Mr. Henderson ESQ was on the second floor, above a defunct check-cashing store. "I go with her," Marco said into a small microphone on his cuff. "Angelo, you have the door. Nico, you have the street. No one, and I mean no one, gets within 20 feet. The office was just as she remembered. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of sunlight. Mr. Henderson, a man who looked like he was made of old, dry paper, peered at her over his glasses. "Miss Hartley," he said. "No," his voice a reedy whine. "I wasn't expecting you. I called Mr. Henderson," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. Marco stood by the door, a silent, menacing statue. "I'm here for my box." Yes, of course." He fumbled with his keys, his eyes darting to Marco and back. Unusual circumstances. He led her to a small, paneled room. He unlocked a drawer, pulled out a metal box. "Sign here." Lena's hand was shaking so badly she could barely form her name. As her pen scratched the paper, she heard it. A high-pitched, screeching sound of tires on pavement, right outside. Marco did not even turn. "Angelo?" he said into his cuff. A voice, tinny and panicked, came back. "Van, black, they're shit." The plate glass window of the office exploded. It did not break. It shattered into a million pieces as 3 men, all in black, all wearing ski masks, burst through. Lena screamed. "Down," Marco roared. He did not run to the fight. He ran to her. He grabbed her by the coat, yanking her from the chair and shoving her behind the heavy metal lawyer's desk, just as the first pop, pop, pop of gunfire erupted in the small room. It was not loud, like in the movies. It was a series of muffled, percussive, sickening thumps, shouts, the sound of a body hitting the file cabinets. The smell of sulfur and fear filled the air. Lena was curled in a ball, her hands over her head, her eyes squeezed shut, her mind a white static of pure terror. A hand, rough and smelling of stale beer and adrenaline, grabbed her arm. It yanked her, hard. "Got her, let's go." The voice she knew was that voice. It was one of Tom's men, one of his poker buddies. She was being dragged, her feet scrambling for purchase on the glass-strewn carpet. She saw Mr. Henderson, a crumpled pile of paper behind his own desk. "No, let me go," she screamed. A blur of motion, Marco, who had been dealing with the man at the door, was on the man holding her. It was not a fight, it was an execution. Marco moved with a speed that was not human. He grabbed the man's arm, and Lena heard a wet, sickening snap. The man roared in pain. Marco did not stop. He struck him once, twice in the throat, hard, open-handed. The man crumpled, gagging. His grip on Lena released. "Angelo!" Marco yelled, pulling Lena behind him, shoving his own gun, a heavy, black object, into the open. "Get the car!" The other 2 attackers were already gone, tumbling back out the broken window as Nico and Angelo returned fire from the street. It was over in 30 seconds. Lena was frozen. She was staring at the man on the floor, gurgling. "Lena!" Marco grabbed her face, his grip hard, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were cold, not a trace of panic. "We are leaving. Now." He did not wait for an answer. He slung her over his shoulder like a sack of flour and ran. He took the stairs 3 at the time, shoved her into the back of the SUV, which was already at the curb, its door open. "Go! Go!" The SUV fishtailed, pulling into traffic, leaving the chaos, the glass, and the blood behind. The ride back was silent. Lena could not stop shaking. She was not crying. She was vibrating. She looked down at her hands. She was clutching the legal documents. She had not let them go. She realized what this meant. This was not just Tom. This was a coordinated, armed assault in broad daylight. This was a war. And she was not just in the middle. She was the territory they were fighting over. The elevator doors opened into the penthouse. Dante was there. He was not in the living room. He was waiting directly in front of the elevator, a dark, vibrating pillar of pure, contained rage. "Report," he said, his voice so quiet, so cold. It cut Lena to the bone. "3, capo," Marco said, his voice formal, his face a mask. 2 in the van, 1 on foot. They were ours. They expected us. Dante's eyes flickered. "The 3rd? "Handled," Marco said. "He is. He will be a message." Dante's gaze finally landed on Lena. He saw her pale face, her trembling hands, the documents clutched to her chest. She walked past him, her feet moving mechanically. She walked to the center of the vast living room, to the 2-story glass wall. She looked at the beautiful, perfect city, a city that was trying to kill her. She'd been so stupid. She dropped the papers. They scattered on the marble floor, and she began to sob. It was not the quiet, hidden grief of the bathroom. It was a raw, primal, animal sound of despair. "It's my fault," she gasped, her hands flying to her face. "Oh, God, it's my fault." Dante was behind her. "Lena!" She spun around, her eyes blazing, tears streaming. "It's me. I did this. I brought this chaos to you. I killed that man, didn't I? The lawyer, he's dead, isn't he?" "He's not our concern," Dante said, his voice hard. "He's my concern. He was just a man, and your men and Tom's. This is because of me." She was hysterical. She did not even know what she was doing. She began to hit him, her fists, small and useless, pounding against his rock-hard chest. "You should have left me. You should have let me take the train. I'm a curse. I'm putting Evie in danger. I'm putting you in danger. What was I thinking?" He did not stop her. He stood like a statue, a mountain, and he let her rage, let her fear, let her guilt pour out of her. He let her hit him until her strength was gone, until her sobs were weak, gasping breaths. When she was spent, she collapsed, her forehead resting against his chest, her hands clutching his shirt. He did not say, "It's all right." He did not say, "It's okay." He just wrapped his arms around her, his large, warm hands encasing her, one on her back, one in her hair, and he held her. He held her as if he were the only thing keeping her from shattering into a million pieces. "This was not your fault," he murmured, his voice a low, rough rumble against her ear. "This was my enemy, and this was his mistake. He almost took me," she whispered, her voice broken. "He had his hands on me." Dante's arms tightened, a possessive, violent clenching. "He will not," he growled. "Get a second chance." He guided her to the massive, low-slung sofa and sat her down. He disappeared for a moment and returned with a warm, damp cloth. He knelt on the marble floor in his $1,000 suit, and he began to wipe the grime and tears from her face. He was kneeling at her feet. His touch was not a command. It was not sexual. It was tender. It was a touch of such profound, gentle care that it broke her heart all over again. She looked at him, really looked at him. The man who commanded men like Marco, the man who had just lost one of his own and was ordering the death of another. He was kneeling, his eyes dark and filled with a storm, focused only on her, her hand trembling, lifted. She laid it against his rough, unshaven jaw. He stopped breathing. He closed his eyes, a flicker of something, pain, need. He leaned into her touch, a predator, gentled, just for a second. "Dante," she whispered. His eyes opened. They were black, bottomless, and filled with a raw, controlled fire that had been burning since the train station. He had not taken from her on the roof. He would not take from her now. He waited. She leaned in, and she kissed him. It was not the tentative, frightened kiss from the roof. This was a choice. This was an answer. It was a kiss of adrenaline and grief and a desperate, burning need to feel alive. He responded, his mouth taking hers, a low, guttural groan rising from his chest. It was not a kiss of comfort. It was a kiss of possession. She was kissing back, her hands in his hair, gripping him, anchoring herself to him. He was the storm, but he was also the eye of it. He was the only safe place. "Dante," she breathed, pulling back just an inch. Her eyes were wide, dark, and filled with a new, terrifying resolve. Don't leave me alone tonight. Please." His expression was unreadable, carved from stone, but his eyes were burning. He stood, and in one fluid, powerful motion, he lifted her from the sofa into his arms. She weighed nothing to him. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, burying her face in his throat. She did not want to see the penthouse, the glass, the city. She just wanted to feel him. He did not take her to the guest suite. He carried her down the hall, past his office, to his own room. It was a cavern. Dark woods, gray linens, black silk. The only light came from the city below, a dim, silver glow. It was the room of a king. A lonely, Spartan king. He laid her on the bed, on the cool, crisp sheets. He did not undress her. He stood over her, a dark shadow, and his gaze was so intense it was a physical touch. "You are sure?" "Lena," he whispered, his voice rough. "There is no going back from this." I don't want to go back." She wept, her voice breaking. "I just want to feel safe, just for one night." "Can you do that?" He sat on the bed. He did not reach for her. He simply sat, a mountain of controlled power. "I can," he said. She moved first. She slid across the sheets into his space. She laid her head on his lap, curling into his side. She needed his heat. He hesitated. Then his hand, large and calloused, came to rest in her hair. He began to stroke it. A slow, repetitive, comforting motion. They stayed like that for a long time. The only sound was the sound of their breathing in the dark. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a deep, aching void. She looked up at him. "Dante." He looked down. She sat up, on her knees, so they were eye to eye. "He was so rough," she whispered, the memory of Tom's man. His hands. He always took. Dante's jaw tightened. "I am not him." "I know," she said. She reached out, her fingers tracing the line of his mouth. "Show me." He captured her hand, his lips pressing into her palm. A jolt, hot and electric, shot up her arm. "Lena," he growled, his voice a warning, a plea. She leaned in, and she kissed him, soft, then hard. He responded, his control snapping. His arms went around her, crushing her to him. His mouth was on hers, then her jaw, her throat, his lips a brand. "You are mine," he growled against her skin. "Do you understand? Mine." "Yes," she gasped, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. It was not a submission, it was an agreement. This was not gentle. It was not slow. It was a desperate, primal, frantic collision. It was the aftermath of a shootout, the rawness of a breakdown. It was two lonely, broken people, clinging to each other in the dark. It was all touches and breathless tension, and the frantic whisper of her name over and over, like a prayer, like an anchor. His hands were everywhere, large and rough and surprisingly gentle, mapping her, learning her, possessing her through her clothes. He kissed her until she was breathless, until her mind was empty of everything but him. It was a fire, hot and consuming, a controlled burn that promised to take down the whole forest. It was the most passionate, most profound, most terrifyingly safe she had ever felt in her life. When Lena woke, the sun was streaming into the room. She was in Dante's bed, alone. The sheets were cool, but they smelled of him, of soap and metal and her. She was not afraid. She was anchored. She found one of his black shirts, the one from the kitchen, and pulled it on. It fell to her knees, a silken armor. She found him in the kitchen, by the espresso machine, already dressed in a sharp, dark suit. He looked up when she entered. His eyes, which had been so dark and fiery, were soft. Just for a second, he held out a cup. "You're all right?" She took the cup. "Yes." She took a sip. Her lips, her body, ached. But it was a good ache. "Dante, I want to stay." He said nothing. He just watched her. "But not as your prisoner," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Not as your guest. I can't just hide in that room. I need to be a partner, not a package. I want to know what's going on." Dante looked at her, at this small, fierce woman in his shirt, who had been through hell and was standing here, negotiating terms. A slow, genuine smile, the second he had ever given her, touched his lips. "Mrs. Rossi, My housekeeper will be here in an hour, he said. She runs this house. She is a talker. If you can handle her, you can handle my men. He was giving her an in. He was letting her see behind the curtain. And Lena, he said as she turned to go. The lawyer, Henderson, he is fine. Scared, but fine. Lena stopped, her heart aching. And the man is Marco? Dante's face hardened. He was a message. Lena, you are under my protection. The entire city will know it by noon. Lena did not know if that was a good thing or a terrible one. She met Mrs. Rossi, a formidable, gray-haired woman who looked at Lena like she was dirt, until Evie toddled out, a piece of toast in her hand, and offered it to the woman. Mrs. Rossi's stern face cracked into 1,000 wrinkles. Ah, Kara, she cooed. Melting by the afternoon, Lena was in the kitchen, a truly massive industrial-sized kitchen in the back of the penthouse, and she was kneading bread with Mrs. Rossi. She was learning the names of the staff. They were not just guards. They were a family, a strange, dangerous family. And for the first time in years, she felt valued. As Lena laughed, a real, genuine laugh, at one of Mrs. Rossi's stories, 2 different conversations were happening in the city, in a dark, smoke-filled office. Tom Calder slid a thick, brown envelope across a desk to a man in a police uniform, a man with a scarred, pockmarked face. I want her. Detective, Tom snarled. I want the girl. And I want to know everything Moretti is doing. I want his leaks. The detective, a man named Walsh, pocketed the envelope. He is a ghost, but everyone's got a price. I will find it. And in Dante's office, Marco stood at attention, his face grim. Capo, he said, his voice low. The word from our contacts, it's not good. It is not just Calder anymore. He's emotional. Stupid. Ravik is not. He has put a bounty on Lena's head, a high one. He does not just want her back. He wants to make a point. He has made this personal. Dante looked out the window, his face a mask of cold, unadulterated rage. He could hear Lena's laughter from the kitchen, a bright, impossible sound in the silence of his fortress. He had just given her a taste of freedom, and the war was no longer about territory or business. It was about her. The silence in the penthouse was different that evening. It was not the peaceful silence of a sleeping child or the comfortable silence of shared space. It was the heavy, pressurized silence of a drawn breath held too long. Dante stood in the center of his dressing room, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. He wore black, not a suit, but tactical gear disguised as casual wear. A heavy Kevlar vest sat unseen beneath a thick wool sweater. A holster was strapped to his side, the leather creaking faintly as he moved. He checked his sidearm magazine for the 3rd time. It was a ritual, a grounding exercise. He knew it was full. He knew the chamber was clear. But tonight, there was no margin for error. You are going, the voice came from the doorway. Lena stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, her face pale in the dim light. She looked small, but her eyes were fierce. Dante did not turn immediately. He slid the gun into the holster and smoothed the sweater down. I have a meeting. Do not lie to me, Dante, she said, stepping into the room. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with anger. I heard Marco on the phone. I heard the names. Ravik, the warehouse district. You are going to fight them. He turned then. His face was a mask of calm, but his eyes were tired. I am going to end it. By walking into a trap? She closed the distance between them, gripping his arm. The wool was rough under her fingers. Ravik put a bounty on my head. He wants you dead. If you go there, he will be waiting. I know, Dante said simply. Then why? She was pleading now, tears welling in her eyes. We are safe here. You have guards. We can just wait. Please, Dante, don't go. I can't. I can't lose you. Not now. The raw honesty of her words hit him harder than a bullet. He looked down at her, at the woman who had stumbled into his life with a stroller and a bruised soul, and who had somehow become the only thing that mattered. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands. His thumbs brushed away the tears that had started to fall. We cannot wait, Lena, he said, his voice low and rough. Men like Ravik do not stop. They do not get bored. If I stay here, eventually, they will find a way in, or they will hurt someone else to get to me. I will not live like that, and I will not let you live like that. I don't care about the danger, she whispered. I care about you, and that is why I must go. He leaned his forehead against hers. Because for the first time in my life, I have something to lose. He kissed her. It was not a passionate, desperate kiss. It was a seal, a promise. It tasted of salt and fear and a love that terrified them both. You gave me something worth dying for, he whispered against her lips, but I intend to live for it. He pulled away, his hands lingering on her arms for a second longer than necessary, before he turned to the door. He made it halfway down the hall before a small, sleepy voice stopped him dead. Daddy? Dante froze. His heart, a muscle he had trained to be steady under fire, skipped a violent beat. Evie was standing at the entrance to the living room, clutching a worn plush rabbit. She was rubbing her eyes with her free hand, her hair a messy halo of curls. She looked at Dante, confused by the tension, by the dark clothes. Daddy go? She asked, pointing a chubby finger at the door. Lena gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She looked at Dante, terrified of his reaction. They had never used that word. Evie had never called anyone that. Tom had been Tom, or simply a loud noise to be avoided. Dante turned slowly. He looked at the child. He looked at the trust in her eyes, the absolute, unearned, crushing weight of that single word. He felt his throat close. He had been called capo, boss, sir, monster. He had never been called this. He walked over to her. He did not kneel. He went all the way down to one knee, ignoring the protest of his tactical gear. He was eye level with her. Yes, he choked out, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. I have to go. For a little while. Okay, Evie said, accepting this with the simple logic of a toddler. She stepped forward and patted his cheek, her small hand warm against his skin. Bye-bye. Dante closed his eyes for a split second, pressing his face into her small palm. He inhaled the scent of baby shampoo and milk. It was the scent of peace. Bye-bye, Piccola, he whispered. He stood up, looked at Lena one last time, a look that said everything he could not say, and walked out the door. He did not look back. He could not. If he looked back, he would never leave. The warehouse was a cavern of rusted steel and shadows on the edge of the industrial district. The wind howled through gaps in the corrugated metal, a lonely, mournful sound. Dante walked in alone. He walked down the center of the vast, empty floor, his footsteps echoing on the concrete. In the center of the room, under a single, flickering halogen light, stood a table. Ravik was not there. Dante had known he wouldn't be. Ravik was a coward who led from the back. Instead, 3 men stood waiting. In the middle was a man with a scarred lip and eyes that glinted with malice. And beside him, looking nervous and sweaty, was Tom Calder. Moretti, the man with the scar said, grinning. You look lonely. I like the quiet, Dante said, stopping 10 feet away. He kept his hands visible, away from his sides. Ravik sends his regards, the man said, and he says thanks for coming out. Makes it easier than digging you out of that tower of yours. Where is he? Dante asked, his voice bored. He's counting the money he's going to make selling that girl of yours to the cartels down south. Tom spoke up, his voice cracking. He tried to puff out his chest, emboldened by the men around him. You stole my family. Moretti, now you pay. Dante looked at Tom. He didn't see a rival. He saw a stain, a mistake. You are a fool. Thomas, Dante said, you think Ravik cares about you? You are bait. Tom's face twisted. Shut up! You're the one in the trap. The scarred man raised a hand. From the shadows of the catwalks above, the distinct metallic clack-clack of weapons being readied echoed. 6 men, maybe 8, surrounding him. Goodbye, Capo, the scarred man sneered. He reached for his waistband. Dante did not move for his gun. He simply dropped to one knee. The warehouse exploded. Not with fire, but with sound. The high-pitched crack of high-velocity sniper rounds tore through the air. The scarred man's head snapped back before his hand even touched his weapon. He crumpled to the floor. Simultaneously, The shadows in the catwalks erupted in chaos. Muffled thuds, shouts of surprise, and the wet sounds of bodies hitting steel. Dante had not come alone. Marco, Angelo, and 10 of his best men had been in position for 2 hours. They had bypassed the perimeter, silenced the lookouts, and waited for the signal. Dante's drop was the signal. Tom stood frozen, his mouth open as the man beside him fell. He scrambled backward, slipping in the sudden slick of blood. No, wait! Dante stood up. He drew his weapon now, a smooth, fluid motion. He walked toward Tom. 2 more gunmen burst from a side office, firing blindly. Dante did not break stride. He fired 2 shots, controlled, precise. Both men fell. The warehouse went silent as quickly as it had erupted. The only sound was the dripping of fluid and the panicked, ragged breathing of Tom Calder. Tom was on the ground, scrambling backward on his hands and heels like a crab, his eyes wide with terror. "Dante, listen, I was forced. Ravik, Dante reached him. He did not speak. He holstered his gun and reached down, grabbing Tom by the lapels of his cheap leather jacket. He hauled him to his feet and slammed him against a concrete pillar. Tom wheezed, the air leaving his lungs. "Please, I have a daughter." "You have nothing," Dante snarled, his face inches from Tom's. "You gave up that right when you sold her out to a butcher." "I can help you," Tom babbled, tears streaming down his face. "I know where Ravik is. I can take you to him." "I already know where Ravik is," Dante said coldly. "My men are paying him a visit at his home right now. He will not be a problem anymore." Tom went limp. Realizing his leverage was gone, Marco appeared at Dante's side, wiping a knife on his pant leg. "The area is secure. Boss, all targets neutralized? We have 0 casualties." "Good," Dante said. He looked at Tom, who was shaking uncontrollably. "Kill him," Marco suggested casually. "Save the paperwork." Dante considered it. The beast inside him, the one that had been woken by Lena's fear, wanted to tear this man apart. He wanted to end him for every bruise, every tear, every moment of terror he had inflicted on Lena and Evie. But then he remembered the way Lena had looked at him that morning. He remembered the daddy whispered in the hallway. If he killed Tom, he was just another monster. Lena deserved better than a monster. "No," Dante said. "He's coming with us." "Boss?" Marco looked surprised. "Bring him," Dante ordered, turning away. "Bound and gagged. Put him in the trunk." "I have a gift for Lena." The penthouse was quiet again, but the tension had shifted. It was no longer the tension of waiting. It was the tension of arrival. Lena sat on the sofa, her knees pulled to her chest. She had not moved for 3 hours. Evie was asleep in her room, oblivious to the fact that her mother was holding her breath, waiting to see if her world would end. The elevator chimed. Lena jumped to her feet, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The doors opened. Dante walked out. He was alive. He was whole. There was a smear of dust on his cheek and a coldness in his eyes that hadn't faded yet, but he was there. "Dante!" She ran to him, not caring about the guards, not caring about composure. She threw herself into his arms. He caught her, the impact knocking him back a step. His arms wrapped around her, crushing her to the hard Kevlar vest he still wore. He buried his face in her neck, inhaling deeply. "I am here," he murmured. "I am here." She pulled back, her hands frantically checking him. "Are you hurt? Is it over?" "It is over," he said. "Ravik is gone." "And Tom?" she asked, the name a whisper of dread. Dante stepped back. He signaled to Marco, who was standing by the elevator. Marco stepped out, dragging a figure behind him, Tom Calder. His hands were zip-tied behind his back, a strip of duct tape over his mouth. He looked disheveled, terrified, and small. Lena froze. She stared at the man who had dominated her life for 3 years, the man who had made her flinch at the sound of keys, the man who had made her believe she was worthless. Marco shoved Tom forward. Tom stumbled and fell to his knees on the marble floor. "Take the tape off," Dante ordered. Marco ripped the tape off. Tom gasped. Coughing, he looked up, saw Lena, and a flicker of his old arrogance tried to spark in his eyes. "Lena," he rasped. "Baby, tell this maniac to let me go. Tell him who I am." Lena stared at him. She waited for the fear. She waited for the shaking, the urge to hide, the instinct to apologize. It didn't come. Looking at him now, on his knees in the shadow of the man who truly loved her, Tom looked pathetic. He was just a bully with no playground left. "I know who you are, Tom," Lena said. Her voice was quiet, steady. It did not shake. "I'm Evie's father," Tom spat. "You think you can just steal her? You think you can play house with a gangster and forget about me?" "You aren't a father," Lena said, stepping closer. She did not look at Dante for permission. She did not need it. A father protects. A father provides. You sold us. You sold us to people who wanted to kill us. "I did what I had to do," Tom yelled, desperate now. "I was in debt. I would have bought you back, I swear." "You would have spent the money on yourself," Lena said, shaking her head. "Like you always did." She looked at Dante. "Why is he here?" "Because," Dante said, his eyes fixed on her. "His fate is yours to decide. You can tell me to kill him, and he will never draw another breath. You can tell me to let him go, and he walks, or anything in between. It is your choice. Lena, you have the power, not him." The room went silent. Tom went pale. He looked at Lena, his eyes wide with genuine terror. He saw the way the guards looked at her. He realized, finally, that she held the leash. "Lena," he whimpered, "please, don't. Remember the good times? Remember when we met?" Lena looked at him. She remembered. She remembered the charm that hid the control. She remembered the slow erosion of her soul. She could have him killed. It would be easy. It would be justice. But then she looked at Evie's closed door. She did not want her life to be built on a grave. She did not want Dante to be an executioner for her sake. She wanted to be free, truly free. And killing him meant he still mattered enough to kill. "I don't want him dead," Lena said. Tom sagged with relief. "Oh, thank God." "Lena, thank you. I knew you. But I never want to see him again," Lena continued, her voice ice cold. She looked at Dante. "I want him gone. I want him to know that if he ever comes near me, or Evie, or sends a message, or even thinks about us, that he will disappear. I want him to live with the fear that I lived with every single day." Dante nodded. A look of profound respect crossed his face. "It shall be done." He stepped forward, towering over Tom. "You heard her," Dante said. "You are exiled. If you are seen in Aurora Heights, you die. If you are seen in New York, you die. If you contact anyone in the city, you die." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a whisper that carried the weight of a tombstone. "And if I ever hear that you have spoken her name, I will find you, and I will take a very, very long time to kill you." "Get him out of my sight," Dante commanded. Marco hauled Tom to his feet. Tom didn't speak. He couldn't. He was weeping, broken by the sheer magnitude of his loss. He was dragged into the elevator, and the doors slid shut, cutting him out of their lives forever. Lena stood in the silence. She took a deep breath. The air felt lighter. The room felt bigger. Dante walked to her. He did not touch her immediately. He waited. "Are you all right?" he asked. She looked up at him. "Yes. I think I finally am." That night, the penthouse was not a fortress. It was a sanctuary. Dante had showered, washing away the dust and the violence of the warehouse. He wore loose pants and nothing else, his skin warm and scarred and real. He found Lena in the bedroom. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city, but she wasn't looking for threats anymore. She was just looking at the lights. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back into him instantly, molding her body to his. "It's quiet," she whispered. "It is," he said, burying his face in her hair. "The wolves are gone." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. The moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face, softening them. "You came back," she said. "You kept your promise." "I will always come back to you," he said. "You are my compass. Lena, before you I was just drifting, surviving." He lifted her hand, bringing it to his lips. He kissed her palm, then her wrist, right over the faint yellow shadow of the old bruise. It was a benediction, an erasure of the past. "Make me forget him," she whispered, her eyes searching for him. "Make me forget everything but this." Dante did not need to be told twice. He picked her up, carrying her to the bed. This time, it was not frantic. It was not a collision of desperate needs. It was slow. It was a worship. He laid her down and moved over her, bracing his weight on his arms. He looked at her eyes, her lips, the pulse fluttering in her throat, as if he were memorizing a map. "I love you," he whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy and golden. He had never said them. He had never thought he would say them. Lena's breath hitched. She reached up, threading her fingers through his dark hair, pulling him down. "I love you, Dante, I love you." When he kissed her, it was with a tenderness that shattered her. It was soft, deep, and filled with a terrifying amount of emotion. He made love to her with a deliberate, focused intensity, treating her body like a sacred temple. Every touch was a question. "Is this okay? Do you like this?" And every response from her was an answer. There was eye contact, deep and unflinching, as they moved together. They were stripping away the layers of defense, the armor they had both worn for so long, until there was nothing left but skin and heat and truth. "You are mine," he whispered against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. "And I am yours, completely. Forever," she breathed, arching into him. "Forever," he promised, and in the dark of the room, with the city sleeping below them, the Mafia boss and the single mom didn't just find pleasure, they found peace. They found a home in the shelter of each other's arms, safe from the ghosts of the past, ready to face whatever morning brought. The penthouse was quiet. For the first time since Lena had arrived, it was not the silence of a fortress, of a held breath, or of a sleeping child. It was the silence of a finished chapter, of a war won. The ghosts had been exorcised, and the morning sun streamed in, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, no longer seeming like ashes, but like diamonds. Dante had watched her sleep, an act that felt more intimate than anything they had shared. He watched the peace settle on her face, the way her features, no longer tightened by fear, had softened in the early light. She found him in the living room, standing by the vast glass wall, looking down on the city that had been his kingdom. He wore a simple gray sweater and dark pants, and he looked smaller, somehow more human. "It's over," she said, her voice soft. He turned, a small, tired smile on his lips. He held out his hand, she took it, and he pulled her against his side, tucking her under his arm. "It is," he said. "Ravik is gone. His organization is in chaos. Tom is a memory." They stood like that for a long time, watching the city wake up. "So what now?" she asked, her voice muffled against his sweater. He pulled back, turning her to face him. He looked at her with an intensity that was almost painful. "Now, we live. This is yours. Lena, the penthouse, the accounts, the family, such as it is. Mrs. Rossi is already planning a menu for Evie. This is your home. You are safe here. You are the lady of this house." He was offering her the world, his world, a kingdom won in battle. Lena looked at him, and her heart, which should have been soaring, felt a sudden, cold anchor of dread. She saw a lifetime of this, a beautiful, safe, gilded cage. She saw Evie, growing up in this marble and glass tower, never knowing the feel of grass, never playing with neighborhood children. She saw Dante, forever standing by this window, watching for the next threat, because in this life, there was always a next threat. Tears welled in her eyes, hot and sudden. Dante's smile faded, replaced by confusion, by a flash of his old, cold fear. "What is it? It is not enough? You want something else? I will buy you." "No," she whispered, shaking her head, the tears spilling over. "Oh, Dante, no, it's too much. I do not understand. I love you," she said, her hands gripping the front of his sweater, as if she could physically hold him. "I love you more than I thought it was possible to love anyone, but I cannot live here." His face hardened. "It is the safest place in the city. It's a fortress," she said, her voice breaking. "Dante, I cannot raise my daughter in a fortress. I cannot. I cannot be the wife of a capo. I do not want to watch you go to meetings and spend every second wondering if you are coming back. I do not want Evie to think that guard is a normal profession." She pulled away, pacing the floor. "I spent my life in a cage built by a weak, cruel man. This is a cage built by a strong, good man. But it is still a cage." He was silent. His face was a mask of stone, but she could see the pain in his eyes. He had just offered her everything he had, and she had rejected it. "This is my life, Lena," he said, his voice a low, hard rumble. "It is all I have ever known. My father built this. I have maintained it. It is who I am." "No, it's not," she said, walking back to him, her eyes blazing. "It is what you do. It is not who you are. Who you are is the man who fed my daughter cereal, the man who held me while I cried, the man who knelt for Evie. That is the man I fell in love with, not the man who commands men with guns." She touched his face, her hand trembling. "I'm not asking you to be weak. I'm asking you to be brave. I'm asking you to leave, with me. We can go. We can go anywhere. We can be just a family, a man, a woman, and a little girl. You can be a security consultant. You can be, I do not care. Just be ours. Be mine." He stared at her. The idea so foreign, so impossible. It was like she had asked him to fly. Leave? Just leave? The family, his father's legacy. "They would never let me go," he whispered. "In this life, you do not just retire." "Then make them," she said, her voice fierce. "You are Dante Moretti. You said you were the only man who could keep me alive. You were wrong. You are the only man who can set us free." The idea, once planted, grew. It was a seed of impossibility, but it was watered by the look in her eyes, by the memory of Evie's hand in his. He was in his office for hours. Lena did not disturb him. She heard his voice, a low, powerful monotone, on the phone. She heard him shouting, once, a rare explosion of his contained rage. She heard a glass break. Then there was silence. She found him at his desk, his head in his hands. "Dante?" He looked up. He looked hollowed out and lighter. "I have made a call," he said, "to a council. Men my father knew. I have told them I am abdicating." "What does that mean?" "It means," he said, standing up, "that I am trading my empire for my life." He walked to the large, ornate, antique safe behind his desk. He spun the dial, his movements precise. The heavy door swung open. "The leadership," he said, "will pass to Marco. He's a good man. He has a family. He will be less volatile than I was. He will keep the peace." He took out stacks of documents, which he ignored. He reached into the back, into a small velvet-lined compartment. He took out two things. One was a thick, heavy, gold signet ring. The other was a simple, platinum band. He looked at the gold ring in his palm. It was his father's ring, the symbol of the Moretti family. It was heavy with the weight of blood, of sins, of a life he never chose. "My father," he said, "gave me this on his deathbed. He told me, it is all that matters. Protect the family." "He was wrong," Lena whispered. "He was?" Dante said. He walked to the fireplace, a modern, cold gas insert. He turned it on, and the blue and orange flames hissed to life. He looked at the ring one last time. He saw his father's cold eyes. He saw the dark, lonely nights. He saw the warehouse. Then he looked at Lena. He saw the garden on the roof. He saw the kitchen, smelling of basil. He saw her, asleep in his bed. "It is just a piece of metal," he said. He did not just drop it. He threw it, with all his strength, into the heart of the fire. The flames licked at it, but it did not melt. It just sat there, a golden idol, being cleansed. Then he looked at the platinum band. "This was my mother's. She never wore it. My father said it was a liability, that it showed weakness." He closed his hand around it. "She died when I was 10. I do not think she ever smiled." He walked to Lena. He took her left hand. He was shaking. The strong, steady hand of Dante Moretti was trembling. I cannot be a king." "Lena," he whispered, his voice thick, "but I want to be a husband." He slid the simple, worn platinum band onto her finger. It was too big, but it was the heaviest, prettiest thing she had ever worn. "It is not a proposal," he said, a little panicked. "It is a promise, a down payment until I can get you a proper one." "It's perfect," she wept, throwing her arms around his neck. "It's perfect." The farewell party was no party. It was a ceremony. The penthouse was filled with the core of his organization. Marco, Angelo, Nico, Mrs. Rossi, a dozen other men and women who had run his life, his businesses, his world. Dante stood at the head of the room, Lena at his side, her hand in his. Evie was asleep, safely in her room. "It is done," Dante announced, his voice echoing in the quiet room. "As of this moment, the Moretti family is no longer mine to lead. Marco is your capo. He has my blessing. He has my loyalty. But he does not have me." He raised a glass of champagne. "To the future, to new beginnings, to the future," they echoed, their voices a low, respectful rumble. Marco stepped forward. He did not look triumphant. He looked sad. He embraced Dante, a hard, brotherly hug. "You will always be capo to me," he whispered. "You are a brother." "No," Dante said, pulling back. "You are the brother. I am just a man." Later, after the formal goodbyes, Mrs. Rossi pressed a tear-stained kiss to Lena's cheek. You take care of my boy," she sobbed. "He was a good boy. He never smiled. I will," Lena promised, her own tears flowing. "I will make him smile. I promise." The room was emptying. The penthouse was being stripped of its heart. A soft, slow song began to play on the sound system. Dante turned to Lena. The room was empty, except for them. "I have never done this," he said, his voice awkward. "Done what?" "Danced," he said. Not like this. Not without a reason." "I can be the reason," she said, stepping into his arms. He was stiff at first, a warrior in a suit, holding a woman as if she were made of glass. She laid her head on his chest, and she felt his heart, a strong, steady beat. She felt his body relax. He sighed, a deep, shuddering release of a lifetime of tension. His arms wrapped around her, and he held her. They were not dancing. They were just holding each other, moving. "I am free," he whispered into her hair. "We are free," she corrected. They stood in the center of the vast, empty room, two survivors, finally free. 6 months later, the sun was different. It was not the sharp, cold light of Aurora Heights, reflected off glass and steel. It was a warm, golden, hazy light, and it smelled of salt and coconut sunscreen. They had moved to a small coastal town 1,000 miles away. They had a small, whitewashed house with a bright blue door and a yard filled with unruly, beautiful, sea-blown flowers. Lena was in her studio, a converted garage, her hands and smock covered in a rainbow of oil paints. She was teaching a class of 6 local children, their laughter bright and chaotic. She looked up, and through the window, she saw him. Evie, now a confident 4-year-old, was starting her first day of preschool. She was holding his hand, skipping, her backpack almost as big as she was. Dante was not wearing a suit. He was wearing cargo shorts and a faded blue polo shirt. The sign on his clean, practical truck read, "Moretti Security Solutions, we keep families safe." He had started a legitimate business. He installed security systems. He consulted on risk assessment for local businesses, and he volunteered to install panic buttons in the local women's shelter. He was still a protector. He was still the man who kept people alive, but he was doing it in the light. That evening, after Evie was asleep, they sat in the back garden. The air was cool, and the sound of the ocean was a distant, gentle shush. Lena was kneeling, pulling weeds, her hands in the dirt. Dante sat on the steps, watching her. He had been quiet all evening. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting back on her heels. "Was the PTA meeting too much for you?" A small smile touched his lips. "They are more frightening than the Ravik Syndicate. So many rules." He grew serious. "I have been thinking about our life. Here. Is it not enough?" Lena asked, a small knot of her old fear tightening. "It is too much," he said, echoing her words from months ago. He stood up and walked to her, kneeling in the dirt in front of her. "I do not deserve this, Lena," he said, his voice thick. "I do not deserve you, or her. Every day I wake up, and I am waiting for the other shoe to drop, for my past to find me. It will not, she said, clutching his face. We are safe. I know. He reached into his pocket, which is why I need to make it permanent, before you realize I am just a broken man who knows how to pick locks. He pulled out a small, simple, velvet box. Dante, she breathed. He opened it. Inside was not a massive, vulgar diamond. It was a simple, elegant sapphire, the color of the sea, set between two small, perfect diamonds. I am not a king, Lena, he said, his voice raw. I have no empire. I have a truck. And this house. And a garden that is mostly weeds. But I love you. I love you with everything that I am. Lena Hartley, will you do me the honor of being my wife? Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. You're already my husband. I want it, he said, to be legal. In the light, I want to be your husband, Dante Hartley or Moretti, whatever you want. Yes, she sobbed, launching herself into his arms, tumbling them both into the soft, sweet-smelling grass. Yes, 1,000 times. Yes. They were married on the beach a week later, at sunset. Evie was the flower girl. Marco was the best man, Mrs. Rossi cried the entire time. It was perfect. A few days later, Lena was walking along the beach, watching Evie chase the sandpipers at the edge of the surf. She saw Dante, sitting on a weathered wooden bench, watching them. His face, once carved from cold stone, was now soft. He was smiling. She walked up to him, the sand cool on her bare feet. She stood before him, blocking his sun. He looked up at her, squinting, his smile widening. Lena smiled back, a playful, loving, radiant smile. Excuse me, she said, her voice light. Can I sit here? Dante Moretti looked at the woman who had saved his life, at the mother of his child, at the love of his soul. He took her hand, the one wearing his mother's platinum band and his new, beautiful ring, and he held it tight. He smiled. Only, he said, if you stay with me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We hope you enjoyed the journey of Lena and Dante. We would love to know where you're listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello. Your support means the world to us. If you loved this story, please consider subscribing to Mafia Romance Stories for more content just like this. And do not forget to share your thoughts in English. We read every single one. Thank you again, and we will see you in the next story.